In a lot of the questions that you all submitted ahead of this event, it was very clear that there was a focus on tensions between technology and ambition, operational realities, and also financial discipline. And the interlinking threads of those three perspectives is the way we wanted to unpack this conversation this evening. So I'm really lucky to be joined by three people who are exceptionally well placed to talk about this. There's a lot to cover in 30 to 40 minutes, so we'll try and get as much coverage as possible, and then we'll come to some open Q&A at the end. So please know that we will have lots of time for your questions. But before I go any further, we should do some intros. So I'm going to pass over to Chris, Christina, and Josephine just to say a few words about themselves, and just maybe a few words about your vantage point on this topic as well. Over to you, Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Astall. I'm the CPTO at the RAC. It's a brand that I'm sure you have all heard of. Our orange vans maybe have saved you at some point. I've worked in private equity-led businesses now for over 10 years. Now at the RAC, but previously at Photobox, which is still private equity-led. And my role is very much about transformation, whether it was at Photobox, but very particularly at RAC. I joined RAC because of the brand, a business that is highly cash generative and that had done no digital transformation. And so, my role, my sort of journey over the last, 3.5, nearly 4 years has been building the teams, investing in the teams, and starting to innovate and get into that to that transformation, and really starting now to deliver business value.
Super, thanks, Chris. Moving on to Christina to say a few words.
Good evening. Christina Barakett. I am a partner in Alvarez and Marsal's private equity performance improvement practice. That probably doesn't cover holistically what I do. I'm trained as a CFO. I've grown up in the finance function. I've worked in interim CFO roles, and I also do transformation as my bread and butter, both inside and across, inside the finance function and across the business as a whole. I work for both private equity extensively and large corporates, and so have seen lots of different flavors of transformation over the years, and it's a topic that I'm really looking forward to discussing tonight.
Awesome, thank you, Christina. And Josephine.
Hi everyone, I'm Josephine Haas. I'm currently the Chief Transformation Officer of Superbet, or Super Technologies, been renamed, which is a $3 billion sports betting business owned by Blackstone. I think my vantage point is that I was also an operating partner at Permira, so I've seen transformation from both sides, within the PE-owned business and from the PE standpoint as well. Transformation can mean many things. In my current role, it's quite broad. It covers everything from external change to internal change. So I'm also in charge of international market expansion, M&A. So, adding more to transformation on top of digital transformation, AI and automation. So quite complex. So really happy to be here. And I feel like the three of us have very complementary experiences. So hopefully we'll.
So I'm hoping the viewpoints will be complementary, but not too complementary, so that we have a little bit of positive friction in the room. So work with me on that. We broadly have a room full of operators as well, so people who are very, very hands-on in terms of the businesses they either work for or with when it comes to transformation. I'm going to throw a kind of broad question out to you all to begin with and say, in terms of transformations you have either been involved with, observed, or maybe even are presently involved with, where is the biggest risk in terms of it going wrong? Let's start with the horror stories, shall we? Who would like to begin?
I'm happy to go first. I think, for me, the biggest and most important thing is having board and exec buy-in. If you don't start at the top, to be honest, you've probably not got much of a chance of delivering the transformation. So, having a board, that's bought in, having an exec that's bought in, and then having a business that's bought in. Transformation is not easy. The tech is the easy bit of transformation. The difficult bit is the human bit and actually landing that in the organisation. So if you don't have that buy-in at the top, you're never going to do it. Certainly not as a tech leader anyway.
Interesting. So actually, Chris, we've got a bit of a kind of question thread on culture and organisation and ton towards the end, but excellent point. Christina, from your financial perspective specifically, like, where do you see the biggest risk?
Yeah, I mean, I would pick up on the culture point as well from a, and I will come to the financial because I definitely have a view on that as well. But on the culture point, I think one of the biggest risks that we see is when there's no winning of hearts and minds in the organization. The overall objective is not clear. There's not that kind of that nice momentum and story behind the transformation to give it a positive feel and getting people, driving forward themselves. From a numbers perspective, I think one of the biggest pitfalls that we see is when it just gets too bitty and too granular around, let's do this small thing here and that small thing there, rather than making people accountable for more holistic objectives. And I think we'll talk more about that, but I think,
Absolutely.
it all comes down to not grounding it in the big picture.
Anything to add, Josephine? Or-
Maybe one, I completely agree. Maybe the only thing to add would be something around building momentum. A lot of the times transformations are quite hairy, so they're quite long. So it's really important to have some quick wins in the beginning to win the hearts and minds, of course, but also create some momentum and excitement in the organization. Otherwise, it kind of withers down if it takes 2 years to see something. So just kind of over-communicating on that and getting people excited, I think, is equally important.
Are you prepared to share a bit more about the hairy transformation you referenced?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, look, I mean, a lot of the times transformation involves technology, right? And these transformation technology programs are long, can be 2-year programs. So you kind of have to have a 2-speed effort where you have the quick wins and the visible momentum that you deliver fast in the first couple of months. And then, but you still need to do the structural stuff in parallel. And doing both, I think, is really, really important. Otherwise, you kind of, a year passes, nothing really happens, the world has changed, and it's like the waterfall type of transformation that's being delivered instead of being agile and building something valuable in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a value perspective, that's somewhere I wanted to land fairly early on, actually. So, Christina, I specifically wanted you to share some views on the lag, I guess. Costs are always very evident with transformation. They come fast and hard up front, etc. And then there can be this lag in terms of value. How have you seen boards, leadership teams evaluate that in terms of value versus activity?
Yeah, so I would say, it really links back to the point about grounding the transformation in some more overall objectives. So I think the successful transformations usually are able to link the outcomes to some sort of KPI that a manager and the leader can actively manage on a day-to-day basis that also then translates into financials. So for example, like in a customer service team, looking at the tickets per FTE that it's handled per day, that will drive the operations day to day. It drives lots of automation. It then links into the financials as well. Or you see some other functions where they're being tasked on cost as a percentage of revenue. How they're progressing towards that. And when you ground in those more holistic measures, then you then start to be able to have the discussion with a board around how you're progressing even before you see the final outcome in the P&L. It's always a challenge to kind of see the financials coming through because, like you say, there is a lag to some of the benefits a lot of the time. But you should be able to see them in those types of leading indicators, which will help give confidence that the transformation is working.
So other kinds of metrics other than just the numbers, right?
Yes.
When you're tracking that, At what point does something signal that it's not working? What do your kind of spidey senses alert to in that process?
Yeah, so I would say, like, I mean, on the flip side, so there you would be able to see quite clearly if you're seeing the right trajectory in things that then will translate clearly into financials and into the P&L. On the flip side, if you start tracking like at a very granular level, okay, I've taken out one cost here and one cost there, and all of a sudden it adds up to 10 million. I've done great and it's wonderful, but you haven't. But actually, what you in that circumstance, you haven't looked at the kind of the overall picture, and actually, in most cases, you find that there's been lots of cost increases in other places, so you haven't actually achieved anything overall.
At which point it's a stiff gin and tonic, no? Chris, from a technological perspective, obviously significant investment. Where do you see that feeding through to commercial outcomes, and how? What are the metrics on that journey for you?
I mean, I think like Christina says, it is ultimately about the financial metrics that you're going to be driving, but it's about finding those KPIs that you can really engage the team with. But actually, if I bring it up a level, it is about making sure that the whole team, from the exec who is sponsoring a particular piece of the transformation, as well as myself, making sure that they're completely bought in, and then really making sure that those metrics are the thing. So an example with the technology team might be to improve the conversion rate on the web journey, on the e-commerce journey. Mm-hmm. We know that if we increase the conversion rate, then we will get more sales. And more sales means more revenue and more profit. So you are driving for those sort of key metrics, which the team can really understand and can track on a day-to-day basis.
And bringing in the team, actually, I was going to ask Josephine, with your operating partner head on, you mentioned the thing about your momentum, that kind of aspect of getting success. How can you tell when a transformation is really landing within an org, or when it's sort of just being tolerated, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite difficult for an operating partner, I guess, because you only see the tip of the iceberg. So you get to see what the chief transformation officer is telling you, what the management team is telling you, but you're not in the organization. So I think the way you can actually check if things are going well, one is just finding those use cases that are quite impactful. Have they landed or not? The KPIs that we all mentioned, those are really important, the operational and financial. And they need to be significant for the business so that they're worth including in the kind of top 5 objectives of the business. Otherwise, there's no reason why you're doing a transformation if it's not top of mind. And I think the third one, which is a bit, people don't actively look for it, but it's getting the pulse of the organization and speaking to people within the organization to understand whether it's really landed, if people are excited, if they want to be part of it or not, if there's enough pull from people. Because it is a cultural change as well, and you want to make it more than a program, but really a new way of working. So I guess that's, as an operating partner, what you can do to kind of figure out if a transformation is landing or not, and make sure to sponsor it from a PE perspective as well, because it's important and it's on the kind of agenda of exec board meetings and so on.
Can you give any examples of your experience where there's been a really kind of shining example of where that has worked and where the momentum, the buy-in, all of that has been created, and you've been able to measure it?
I mean, I guess, because we talk about AI, I think AI is one of the topics for today, right? So we can open the Pandora's box here. So super technologies, we didn't have an AI strategy, as most companies actually, if we're really honest. We're just trying to figure out how do we use AI to improve our productivity, to improve our customer proposition. So we stood up a AI and automation center of excellence, and how do we get people to know what we're doing? How do we get excitement? We found a couple of use cases that were highly impactful. We went for them, we presented them in the town hall, so for everyone to understand, in our exec meetings to our board as well. So we started to get momentum. I think communication, like internal comms, actually, I know played a huge role because people knew that we were doing this. People could come in and give their own ideas and contribute to it, and then create excited around it. So I think in a couple of months, hiring the right person, getting those use cases and communicating well, we're able to land a lot of impact in the organization.
Great stuff, really interesting. I wanted to flip back to Christina with one more question connected with really revenue and commercials. Are there instances where short-term EBITDA impact shows up, but it's hard to tell whether the structural transformation is succeeding? Can you speak to that at all?
I mean, sure, you do get some circumstances where you'll get you'll start to see some incremental change without necessarily seeing the structural change. I think it comes back to a lot of times the point that I mentioned before, when you start tracking small things without looking at the big picture. And overall, you really want to see the KPIs of the business moving in the right direction on revenue and on cost as well, and that you're getting towards your business plan. So I think, you do need to look at it in that holistic perspective for sure.
So incremental change equals big impact. That's to say.
I think. I mean, it surely that's the way it often happens. It's a series of incremental changes that will get you where you're going, and so you need to, and most transformations do take place over a long enough time period that are successful. So you should see that build up over time. I mean, one of the key things that slightly less tangible and less CFO-like, but that you see that really encourages you about the success of the transformation, to your point about the buy-in and the momentum, is when people start coming up with their own ideas. And it's not just something that the leaders are pushing, but actually you start to see things coming up through the organization, and you start to see that it becomes outside of your initial transformation program, that you have new things that are surfacing and people are driving that have a real impact, and people have kind of taken hold of it.
Okay, amazing. I think one of the questions that we had was around, even if the commercials are clear within a particular scenario, is it the case that we're solving the right problem? And that problem could be a tech problem, and I'm going to come to you, Chris, or is it more of a process problem? Are we looking at the right foundations when these programs are initiated and then continue to driven forward?
So I think it depends on the organisation. I mean, some organisations have structural tech problems which need to be addressed, before you can really get to any sort of growth, whether that's revenue growth or cost saving. When I was at Photobox, that was a big problem. I joined Photobox. We were a combination of a number of businesses that merged together. We had 3 platforms. So to be able to make any change to our customer journeys, our e-commerce journeys, we had to make the change in 3 different platforms. That's expensive. So actually the first bit of the transformation was about consolidating those platforms into a single platform, which would then make us more efficient as an organisation. The RAC though is very different. We only have, we have lots of platforms, but not in the same way that do the same thing. So the transformation was, has been very, very different. I joined the RAC, we had 10 people in what we call digital at the time, sat in marketing. And everything was sort of sat in data centers, and there were no technologists in the organisation. So the transformation has been about building a team, investing in that team, bringing in technical people who know how to manage everything from IT to CISO, but more importantly, the product management, the engineering, the product design that's allowed us to build both a digital platform and a data platform, which is now powering the business. And the success for me, going back to the structural point, is now when somebody's got an idea of something they want to build, so if one of my co-execs, says, I need this thing delivered, I've got this great business case, I can now deliver that, in weeks or months rather than months and years. That's the structural change that's needed. That was needed as we now have.
And Christina, I'm sure there are many instances where you've seen shiny new technology layered over, processes that needed to be fixed. What's been the consequence for you around that, and how have you overcome it?
So whether we're seeing a real impact from some of these shiny new tools
That's
is
it.
always it comes down to actually, is someone willing to put a benefit in their budget, up front? Is that something people are signing up to, or is it just, a kind of well, this will help us be more scalable, in which case you can also put that in your commitments, in your multi-year plan, or whatever else. So for me, that's usually the first question, and then the second thing is even before you get there, are we focused on the big ticket items, or are we going after some shiny new tools that are going to play around the fringes where it's not really where the business has the majority of its resources? It's not addressing the kind of the big chunks of resources in the business. Are we prioritizing the efforts appropriately in these big shiny tools to hit the big problem spots in the business?
That's it, I think. And talking of big shiny tools, we'll come on to AI. We'll let that cat fully out of the box. Where are you all seeing, in fact, AI actually really commercially move the needle, rather than just sort of improve the systems?
Cool.
Anyone?
I think, as I've probably made quite clear, I'm only interested in investing in any sort of technology if it's going to have a positive business outcome. But there are, a number of different AI projects that we've been very carefully selected at RAC. We've got one where we are taking calls out of our contact center using conversational AI. We had a logger breakdown, so if you phone us now, you will immediately talk to a voice AI. We tell you, but you may not know. It's amazing how many customers don't necessarily know they're talking to a bot, even though we tell them. But that bot will ask you for the relevant information, the information that allows us to identify you as a customer, and that you have a policy, understands what vehicle you've got, where you are, and what problem it is with your vehicle, and that then logs the breakdown into our deployment system, and then we deploy patrols to come and fix you, and that's clearly taking cost out of the contact center. We reduced the contact center from something like 350 people 3 years ago. We're probably about 50 to 75 now, so clearly taking cost out of the business and really easy to get to. But one of the things that I'm even more interested in and quite excited by is something we've developed quite recently, which is our AI sales coach. So this is where we take all of the calls that come into our sales operation contact center. We use an AI to transcribe them. We then use an AI to score those calls and give the agent feedback on how that call's gone. So we score against a number of criteria: how they warm up the customer, how they objection handle, and how they close. But more importantly, we use AI to then give them feedback. And this has landed really, really well with the contact center. They used to have individuals, managers giving them feedback, but there's a lot of subjectivity, and it's interesting because they actually prefer an AI giving them feedback than they did a human, because they still think of a computer as something that is right. And what's it's led to some really great business outcomes. We've got about 1% save rate improvement from that. But more importantly, the colleagues are really loving this. This is where we're able to use AI to help the colleagues be better at their jobs. So not take their jobs away, but be better at what they do. And they're commission based, so ultimately if they're better at selling, they get more money. And so it's working really well.
Josephine, are you seeing similar
I
actually have the same use case on contact centers, which is a slightly different problem, which is, we have huge number of volumes of people calling us, and we would do 2% of the calls we would check with some human, QA team. And now we're able to exhaustively check all the calls on all the criteria, give real-time feedback, and see significant improvement in individual performance based on that feedback, which is amazing. I'm still looking to see how that translates into financial, benefits in the future, whether that's, ability to scale the contact center quicker. Obviously, you don't need such a huge QA team, but I think in this case for us, it's increasing customer experience rather than cost out. I'm seeing a lot of these kind of high yield AI programs, but I'm also seeing even in Super, but also outside, a lot of people just deploying different tools, which are expensive, but not necessarily seeing the benefit on the other side of the equation. So that's a danger of being, just too excited and overhyped around this, which is why I think it's important to have some sort of central governance around how you do things and focus on the big programs first, and not let it democratize too much. Give some flexibility. Obviously, people should be able to, use their own productivity, choose their tools, but at the same time, I'm seeing a lot of overhype.
Sounds like we have two maximalists here, to my far left and to my left. Christina, what proportion of the businesses that you're deep into at the moment are succeeding or failing on the spectrum? I think it's a question that's on everybody's mind pretty much every day right now.
I mean, we're definitely seeing some emerging strong benefits. I wouldn't say it's pervasive everywhere, but there are some pockets. Like, I mean, the use cases that Chris and Josephine mentioned are definitely common ones. We've seen, like, in the software development life cycle, a lot of benefits as well in terms of acceleration and actually some quite aggressive cost takeout in those functions. We've seen in the finance function some automation capabilities that weren't previously possible, like where you have multiple systems and you need to be able to manage workflows through the AI tools. That has unlocked some benefits for some quite messy finance processes in businesses. So we're definitely seeing some emerging use cases. We're actually also, I think, exploring we only do something if it is going to have an impact. So we only get hired if there is a value proposition, like a tangible value proposition. But we do have some ongoing work around end to end, small. Well, not so small anymore, actually. It's how should I describe the business without telling you what the business is exactly? But they're a business services company that services loads of customers, and they have their full processes from commercial to the back office process. They're looking to re-engineer as in AI-led processes, and that is something that is getting worked on now. And it's a private equity backed business that is generating some benefit from that. But yeah, it's very. I wouldn't say that it's transformational in every business as of today, but we're definitely seeing some emerging hard benefits to it.
I mean, I'm curious to know from all of you how early on in the VCP these elements are being included. As AI continues to envelop us with increasing velocity, how far back is that now being embedded into the planning process? I mean, Chris, I'm sure it's fundamentally baked into your roadmap right now, but from a VC perspective, what are we seeing?
Yes, now it's baked into everything we're doing, and particularly into software development, as you talked about, Christina. We will start to take more and more cost out as we're able to deliver more product. But I think now, whenever I'm looking at any new, let's call it project, but initiative, whatever you want to call it, my immediate go-to place is how will I use AI to solve this problem faster, and equally to be able to tell an equity story, to our investors.
And Josephine, in terms of with your operating partner head on,
Yeah, well, let's say when was I? 3 years ago, before I left Premier, we were still AI and automation were still typically one of 5 top value creation plan initiatives. I think it's also for the excitement of for the hype and the excitement and to tell the right story. It was quite early, and at Super now it's among the 10 key objectives for next year. But it's still, unless it's a business that's fundamentally disrupted by AI, I think it's still early days to embed it. I've been asked a question by the board, like, what's the impact of AI on your EBITDA and revenues for next year? The honest answer is, it's still very early days. We'll have examples and use cases. Well, you'll see some benefits, but you won't be able to say, we'll have a 5 percentage points to, increase in our EBITDA margin because of AI. It's going to be difficult to tell. So I think it's still early days. But there are cases where, translations, for instance, right? The industry has been completely disrupted. It's a different business model thing. But if it's a business that's enabled by technology and AI, I think it's still quite early days and quite incremental in terms of the actual impact.
Excellent. Let's just move on to the piece around execution. There are a number of different questions from the audience around, even if the commercials look positive, when the technology is exciting and kind of being used in the right way, transformations still often struggle. And I think at this point we can land firmly in the camp of, the story, the culture, the organizational design. What are you seeing, Chris, from an RAC perspective that's helping you kind of land this progress and really accelerate?
I mean, I think having been at the RAC now for 4 years, I've managed to build up credibility within the rest of the exec and with our CEO. That means that, whenever we now almost have any problem across the organisation, it comes back to technology. I mean, we are a technology company, but we are a technology underpins everything we do, from selling breakdown cover through to deploying our patrols at roadside. And so, every problem now I think comes back to, Chris, what technology do we need? How quickly can we get it? What's going to be the cost of being able to deliver that? And probably, as just said, how is AI going to play into that? So, it is, I think, fundamental now.
Fundamental. Christina, when you start with a new team, what are your kind of foundational aspects that you look to set in motion immediately?
I mean, the first key one is really transparency on the data and on what is going to move the needle. And I mean, ultimately, like when we talk about cultural change, from like one formula that I always think of is accountability and incentives. And so like transparency and providing the transparency on data and what's working well, what's working less well. Where are we cost efficient? Where are we not cost efficient? Where are we profitable? Where are we not profitable? Often that then gives people the tools to be able to be accountable. And then when they have the incentives to then act to get more profitable, which we all know private equity is a master of giving the right incentives for that, it then becomes a winning formula generally.
And Josephine, in terms of maintaining momentum and not slipping into transformation fatigue or organizational resistance, what does your experience tell us there?
Look, I think really important, maybe a recap of what we discussed for this point, like sponsorship from the top, making sure it's one of 5 objectives for the year. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it, right? It needs to be front and supported, right? Over communication in the organization, making sure people know what it is, and then rallying people around it and getting people involved in it and getting them to see the benefit of transformation.
And just one final question for you all before we go to the audience, because I know there'll be some really great questions. How if you were to do a bit of crystal ball gazing for 2026, how are things going to look vastly different, and where might they stay the same? Because I think every time we have discussions around these topics, there are some first principles that still apply, right? Chris, great, gaze into your crystal ball for us.
So, I mean, maybe it's not crystal ball, because I think this is going to happen, right? AI in particular is changing the way we do software development. It is speeding us up, 3, 5, 10 times from where we were last year. And so our ability to deliver both customer-facing products, but also replace tooling within the business, particularly, I'd say B2B SaaS tooling that we use currently with our own code and to manage, will take huge amounts of cost out. So, the change over the next, 12 to 18 months for us will be huge amounts of cost out, more product, which will drive more revenue, for the business, which will really allow us to accelerate.
Yeah, I have to concur. I think the AI and tech is definitely it's definitely what's on my mind all the time. I think, I think we're all really sort of trying to get our heads around what's the art of the possible. Like Josephine was saying, how do we really get a good grasp of this and what could be done? It changes. It does change the game. So I think it will continue to take the stage for a while.
How do you think we can take some learnings from maybe some of the last disruptive tech cycles? What do you think, Josephine?
Look, I think it's a reinvention. I think it's almost, remember there was a time where we were doing Lean Six Sigma, so it was all about process, then it was digital transformation, and now it's AI, I don't know how we call it, but kind of AI-enabled transformation. But I would just say it always starts with the process, so I think we shouldn't overlook the fundamentals and the stuff that really matters, and bringing in good talent and having alignment and having the good and standardized processes, and everything else comes on top. I think that's important to recognize, because we're always reinventing. It's just building on top of something that already exists, and people tend to be overly excited about AI, but then they forget, well, before we apply AI, we need to have the right data, we need to have the right processes. So it's the boring stuff as well that we need to make sure is delivered.
And I would just add to that, like you said, the people come first. If you don't have the right people, you can't get the processes, you then can't get the tech and the systems to work. So it kind of has to stay with those fundamentals as well.
But I do also think that, as AI transforms, all of our lives, I think some of those processes, that we rely on today will change. Probably quite fundamentally from where they are now. We will still be building software, we'll still have businesses that are making money, but the way we do it will be very different. And this change is happening so much faster than the last one. Digital, came and I've been doing digital transformations for 10 plus years. I've been in technology for 30 plus years. But AI has come from almost nowhere, a year ago, probably in the corporate world, to something that is fundamentally changing businesses, today, certainly ours.
Christina, you're going to add on? Yeah, please.
On that. It's just that one wise operating partner told me that we're all grappling with all this tech and looking backwards to your point, Julia, about previous tech overhauls and kind of the internet and emails and all this, that it all came, that there was a point on the internet where people were being told, use the internet, but there wasn't that killer app. And it was we still haven't got that killer app that enables us to really leverage this technology fully yet and embrace it. So that's kind of perhaps the gap that still needs to close a bit, and perhaps we'll see a bit more in 2026.
I think it feels quite often in a lot of these discussions that we're kind of in a messy middle between, a huge wave of innovation, etc., but we haven't quite been able to figure out how that's structurally going to look going forward. I love the theory of I love the topic of reinvention, Josephine, but I'm going to throw it open to the floor now because I know that we've got a lot of burning questions. If I could get Joey, I'm going to pass over a mic here so that we've got at least one room to mic. Sort of swag spur. And then we'll take as many questions as we can for sort of the next 10 minutes, if that works with everyone, and then we can have another glass of wine.
Good evening. Thanks for having a lot. It's really interesting. Two themes that came out a lot were you need to get top board to top management support, and you need to have the right quality of people. My questions will structure, and not just to Chris, but to all of you. Structurally, on the board of these businesses, where do you guys sit? Traditionally, CTOs were not necessarily on the main board, they were reporting to the CMOs, transformation directors, normally sat reporting to the CEO, but not necessarily on the board. Where do you think it is today, and where do you think it needs to be in order to address what's coming up for the next few years?
I mean, I'm lucky. I mean, for two reasons. So I sit on the ExCo at REC. I report to the CEO. My board consists of Silver Lake Private Equity, so a company that really understands both digital and now AI transformation. But I do think it's important that the CTO, and I do mean a CTO rather than necessarily a CIO, sits at that table, because the transformation is an organisational-wide transformation, and ultimately you need to bring all of your all my exec colleagues on that journey. They need to understand what is capable. Part of my job is to make sure that the rest of the exec understand, whether it's digital, whether it's AI, what that can bring to the organisation, and when they've got a problem they want to solve, how we can solve that with the technology.
Just to add, I'm also part of the ExCo and also reporting into founder CEO, so I'm part of those board discussions, which is really important. And even in my time at Permira, some transformation officers were reporting indeed into the COO or the CFO, but more recently it's becoming a really important role, almost the second role after the CEO, even so more important than the CIO or the CTO. It depends on the situation, obviously, but always at the table, in charge of the value creation plan, and with AI being so important, and increasing importance, so is the role of the transformation officer.
Peter.
Right, thank you. Very really interesting conversation. One question I had is about the ROI in AI. There's a lot of people talking about that. And the question I have is, when you say, Chris, up front, you said, the business was earning lots of cash. There's no IT, there's no AI. And of course, the business makes a lot of cash. Why would the owners invest in something? Because an investment is defensive. How do you calculate the ROI on a defensive investment? So, is ROI the right way to look at it? It certainly depends on the situation, but how do you communicate with the owners and the management teams in your cases to make clear when is ROI, how important is ROI, what other things are part, how to make a judgment, really. It's not just ROI, honestly.
So I think there are two types of ROI. The first type is, do I get back what I invested in a project? So if I'm going to spend, £1 million on a project, am I going to get £1 million back? And then over what time period? A year, 2 years. It's not going to be very long because technology is changing so fast. But the other way of looking at ROI is, if I invest £1 million and that £1 million can take, £2 million of cost out of this business at a multiple. And again, this is a P type view. At a multiple of 10 times, 15 times, that 2 million is worth 20 million, 30 million. And so you're thinking about enterprise value rather than necessarily the investment, just recouping the investment.
And maybe to add, there's also a more qualitative ROI where AI is an enabler and it's not yielding direct revenue or direct cost benefits. So, it's the quality of the interaction with the customer, it's the quality of the customer experience, it's the quality of the data. It's, how digitized the business is, so how much operational efficiency exists and how scalable it becomes, and therefore it impacts the multiple, through the story, through the exit or the equity story. So it's much more indirect. And for PE, it's actually quite difficult to sell this a lot of the times, because the kind of PE, deal person would say, how does this pay for my carry? Right? So, and you'll say, yeah, it will, because eventually it will influence the story and you'll have to, But the reality is sometimes it is an enabler, so it's much more difficult to sell.
It feels like maybe that's the same way that you would look at a product roadmap decision. It perhaps sometimes you can clearly link it to some benefits, but sometimes it's just, this is where we feel we need to go in the marketplace, and that's how you might look at it.
Thanks, Victoria. I have one at the back here.
So I don't. One of the questions I had is, I've dealt with PE firms for like 5-6 years, and when the AI trend came along about 3 years ago, to be honest, what I've seen is operating partners, evaluation teams, just frankly ignoring AI. And what I see recently is sort of the realization that we could do something. But what I've also seen is still the reluctance of actually going all in. So, I've seen some of the use cases which are on creating chatbots is okay, but actually the operating model of firms is going to change completely. And if you're talking about value creation, what I see is when the PE firms exit, what I see happening is when the buyers do due diligence, they're going to look in depth for AI as it costs the funds. What do you see? Do you see that? Sort of like mentioned with RSI. Are you seeing any of that? I'm seeing it now where people want to exit their portfolios, and then I'm going, well, shit, our valuation exit if we don't really have AI in bed. Do you see any of that happening already? Do you see the firms that looking for the owners going, what do you think about seriously, not just a chatbot, but actually eventually reinvent how this is going to work?
I mean, again, as you say, I mean, I'm lucky because I have Silver Lake, who are a tech investor. So, they've been talking about AI for a while with us. But they're going on a journey as much as we are, right? With their portcos, how are they starting to leverage AI to change their businesses? So, I think they're very supportive. They are pushing me certainly to make sure that I build an AI story such that a relevant time. That I can tell that story, but it's not at any cost. They understand that if you could waste huge amounts of money, investing in various different AI projects, you would not get any return on the investment. But they're making sure that, they're pushing me to make sure that we've got projects that can tell a story, whether that's around chatbots or the sales coaching that I was talking about, or the development of the efficiency of our development that I'm talking about. So I think they do want it to be part of the story, but they don't want it to be at any cost.
I mean, maybe with Permira, I was quite lucky because they were, back in 2018 when I joined, they also hired a head of AI, and they hired a bunch of data scientists that they then embedded within the sectors. So we were quite early on in anticipating that. And we had 3 categories of companies. We had the high maturity data companies, we called them at the time, the kind of medium and the low maturity ones. And so we even had like an AI conference with the kind of AI experts within the portfolio companies, and we would make sure that the exit story would include some sort of AI, value creation. But I don't think all private equities were as future thinking as Permira at the time. I think there's a mix.
Yeah.
I have a question here from Alvarez.
Fantastic panel. It's been really interesting to hear how you're using AI from an internal perspective. I'm really interested, you mentioned customer experience. My controversial, probably strong view is we'll be having agent experience rather than customer experience pretty soon. How are you looking at your organisations and your portfolios to encourage them to use AI not just internally, but also to look at how they're going to address the fact you might not be talking to customers probably as early as next year, and focus more on agents?
A hush descended on the room.
For RAC, we have customers, right? Many people in this room are our customers. So, unless you're going to deploy agents to start talking to me when, you talk to us, then we're still going to be talking to humans. The difference is, I think, you will be talking to an agent. I mean, you will already be talking to an agent if you broke down and called us. So at the moment, I'm not really thinking about that, if I'm honest, just because of the business model at the moment. But I'm sure, plenty of others are.
Take a couple more, I think we have yours. And then,
Good, yeah.
advantage.
Andrew. Yeah, thanks to Paul and questions. Interesting. Picking up on points around ROI on positioning with transactions there's within boards. Could you give us some examples of how governance would be utilized in situations to project the transformations in its organization that we talked about, and to also perhaps break accountability? Budgetary support.
So, I mean, a couple of thoughts on that one. One is like Josephine mentioned, if the transformation is hitting on some of the key overall objectives for the company, that'll put it at the forefront of the discussion. So that's an important one. But also having the regular visibility of how the business is tracking against those objectives of the transformation, how the business is tracking against its objectives of its longer term plan, rather than just the current year, and then having through the program a good accountability of who's responsible for what, and that visibility when you're tracking the program is pretty critical to getting the buy-in and making sure that people are responsible for delivering what they've set out to.
One thing I've noticed is that sometimes you have transformation happening in silos. So you have finance transformation, HR transformation, automation, migration from Microsoft to Google, all of this stuff. So I think for me it's been very important at Super to bring together all those and interlink them. What are the dependencies? How do you present them as a single plan rather than silo transformation? How do you make sure you apply the same change management framework? You look at the business cases in the same way and just kind of have a bit of more consistency across that. That was really important.
I think if I bring it back to AI for a second, AI transformation is slightly different. And the reason I think it's slightly different is, we run an AI governance committee at RAC, and it's important because the things that we want to measure are things like bias and potential for hallucination. As we deploy AI tools both internally and even more importantly externally with our customers, how do we monitor those tools? How do we make sure that, if OpenAI launch the latest model, that suddenly our AI doesn't start talking to our customers in a way that we don't want them to. And that's really important, and that's different. And that's very different from, say, a digital transformation or some of the transformations that have come before. Making sure that you've got those new metrics in place and that you're looking at those and making sure the AI doesn't go rogue.
Time for just two more questions, I think. Then right behind you.
Thanks very much for a great talk. It's nice to reconnect with Josephine, who's the operation partner and solutions. Would be there. My question is the provocative around the understanding of AI transformation funds. Do you see it as a risk that the bike community is focusing on AI, specifically intelligence, rather than on automation? The majority of use cases being demonstrated not only in recent times, but also last 10 years are automating work processes. The danger is two things happen. One, the boards don't focus on the reality, which is the automation of the technology. But secondly, they don't actually change the organizations. And to create value through automation, one needs to actually look at the vertical organization versus horizontal. You're going to take the state of some of those funds.
That's a bit weighty this time.
Yeah, it's better than wrong. Again, I think with AI, we're only really just entering the part where AI is going to automate process and automate human activity. The hype last year was very much around large language models and being able to talk to an AI and get it to help you write an email, write a presentation. It's about personal productivity. I mean, personally, I'm a lot more productive because I use a large language model. Many times a day. It's only really in the last sort of maybe 6 months, maybe a year, that sort of automation is coming out. So I still think it's quite new for exec teams to understand. It's happening in software engineering, and I think it will. A lot of things happen in software engineering before they happen, also in technological things before they happen in other parts of the business, simply because software engineers already understand automation because that's what they've essentially been doing for their careers. And that's certainly what we're doing, I think, some of the other panelists. But this is going to spread across the rest of the organisation, and I think there's an awful lot more still to come.
Look, I've seen a lot of automation happening, one with RPA, which was obviously less sophisticated, and then with low-code workflow, which was a bit more sophisticated, and now it's even more sophisticated. So I think we've gradually gone into this idea that we are going to change the way we work and automate more of our processes going forward, and that AI can be a tool for that. But again, I think it's still incipient in terms of like this is what the best use cases are, and I think by end of next year, we'll figure out, this is stuff that works, this is stuff that doesn't work, these are technologies that are helpful, not helpful, and so on. So that will parse through quite quickly.
Yeah. And maybe what this also leads into is that, we're, I think, relatively focused on specific, the vertical right now. And then to get the horizontal, and I'm not an AI expert, but I think you need some more of those, you need to get more into the workflow tools that are, I think, a little bit more emergent still, unless you're a software developer who can then configure things to work together and configure the layer to work on top of the verticals to get that horizontal layer. I think it's probably still I think that's still pushing the boundaries right now for a lot of organizations to be able to achieve that horizontal flow.